Welcome to the world this week. This week, aggression on Iran. The U.S. and Israel launch an unprovoked attack targeting Iranian leaders. The Mideast in flames. Iran strikes back at Israel and U.S. bases, attacking them across the region. I'm Joe Lauria, the editor-in-chief of Consortium News. 23 years after George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq on false intelligence and little international support, Donald Trump has begun a war of aggression against Iran with no intelligence and no international support. The United States and Israel launched their war earlier today to overthrow the Iranian government with no credible rationale or legal authority, unleashing a conflagration that could alter history. Joining us again this week is an exhausted Scott Ritter, a former UN Chief Weapons Inspector in Iraq, a former U.S. Marines counterintelligence officer, author, and geopolitical analyst. Scott has been up all night, as pretty much I have, following these events. But I'm really happy to see you here, Scott, and we're going to get the last bits out of you on a long day. So the latest news in a day of cascading news is Trump announcing the death of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and who Iran is not confirming is dead. What are if this is true, and I want to know your thoughts about that, what are the repercussions, not only in Iran, but across the region?
Well, first of all, the thanks for having me, and thank you for all the work you've done today. My wife reminded me when I made the announcement to her that I am not going to do one more interview. You know, she she said, this is a moment in history, and it could be one of those defining moments in history. And if people feel that you can contribute to a better understanding of this moment in history, you have a duty and responsibility to do that. So she's 100% correct. This is a moment in history. It's not America's proudest moment. It's the opposite, but it is a defining moment. This is a regime change war. We need to understand that the goal and objective here is to eliminate the government of the Islamic Republic and replace it with a government that is more compliant to the desires and policy objectives of the United States and Israel. So if you're going to have a regime change war, it's imperative that you eliminate the regime. And the very first missiles that struck Iran were targeting Ali Khamenei's residence. We know that. I've heard that up to 6 of the cruise missiles that were fired into Tehran struck his residence. The goal was the complete obliteration of the residence. And yet, in the Iranian government early on said that both Khamenei and the Iranian president had been evacuated and had not been struck. It's tough if you're one of the purposes of your attack is to motivate Iranians to take to the streets to liberate themselves, as President Trump says. It's hard to get them motivated to take to the streets if the head of the beast, so to speak, is still there. And so I think what we're seeing here is, well, first of all, we don't know what the status. You said, the reports are, Netanyahu saw a body. President Trump has seen the photograph, that it's confirmed. I don't know about that. But, the Iranians aren't in any hurry to provide incontrovertible proof to the opposite. So the Iranians have responded far more forcefully than anybody thought they could. And the momentum of the attack of the Israeli U.S. attack is petered out. Nobody's talking about the overwhelming assault that's taking place against Iran anymore. Everybody's focused on the sustained Iranian retaliation. And, you can't have that narrative out there and expect people to rise up against the regime if they ever are going to. So I think what we're seeing is information warfare. where the goal is to generate hope within the anti-regime community in Iran and abroad that in fact regime change is possible because the supreme leader has been killed. We don't know. Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't. But I will say this, it doesn't matter. Because if you think regime change centers on the elimination of a person, you don't know anything about the regime you're trying to change. Ali Khamenei is a human occupying a position. The Iranians have always been prepared constitutionally to replace the supreme leader. There is a board, the Assembly of Experts, that whose job is literally to babysit the supreme leader to make sure that everything the supreme leader does is in conformity with Islam, since this is the Islamic Republic, that the supreme leader's health is up to speed, and that if at any time the supreme leader is deemed incapable of doing the job, to have somebody already picked to step in. And so let's say they killed Ali Khamenei. The supreme leader still exists. And the supreme leader that exists will be respected and revered in Iran the same way that Ali Khamenei is. So this shows you the shallowness of the thinking of those people trying to achieve regime change in Iran. We'll find out eventually if Ali Khamenei is alive. Proof of life will be provided, and there will be a lot of embarrassment all around. The Iranians are admitting that his immediate family was killed, tragically. His daughter-in-law, his daughter, his granddaughter, son-in-law, and his son, I believe, have been confirmed as being killed in the airstrike. But again, the idea that the death of this man is going to be one of these moments that changes the momentum of this conflict is absurd. What we do know is that Iran continues to function. There is central authority. Orders are given, orders are obeyed, and you can't change the regime when the regime is in full control. So this I just think is wishful thinking on the part of those who are trying to promote the concept of the weakness of Iran and the fragility of the Iranian leadership.
Yeah, this is not chess. You kill the king, game is over.
Right.
And it's not Venezuela, which was a coup. They removed the leader, but it was not a regime change. They just co-opted the regime. This is different than that, isn't it? This is a regime change. They need to knock out the whole government. They realize that killing the king is not good enough.
100%. And again, it demonstrates, I mean, I understand when politicians are ignorant, because generally speaking, if you say politician, it's implied ignorant. They are superficial, they are narcissistic, things of that nature, but they tend to surround themselves with experts who advise them. And when you have a president of the United States as ignorant as Donald Trump is, you would expect people around him to be able to advise him accurately on the reality of Iran. But just as the case with Russia, I think that we have allowed the intelligence community to become politicized for so long in the academic community. You can't have an informed discussion in Georgetown University, School of Foreign Service, about Russia. Because if your position is anything other than Vladimir Putin is an illegitimate dictator, then they don't want to talk to you. And you can't have an informed discussion in Georgetown or Harvard or Stanford or anywhere about Iran if your response to, well, Iran is a theocratic dictatorship run by a supreme leader. If your response is, no, actually Iran is a constitutional republic where the Constitution and the will of the people is manifest. If you say that, they are immediately dismissive of you. But that is the reality. that Iran is a constitutional republic. It's an Islamic republic, but it's a constitutional republic. It is a functioning constitutional republic with a parliament that makes laws, with a president that exercises executive authority. Yes, there's a Islamic component, so we have a guardian council, and we have the Assembly of Experts, and we have the Expediency Council are there, but their purpose is to ensure constitutional conformity, not to provide some sort of a vehicle of theocratic dictatorship. If you can't solve a problem, and regime change is a solution to a problem. You can't solve a problem if you don't first define the problem accurately. And the U.S. government is trying to solve a problem that's been inaccurately defined. When you are focused on the elimination of Ali Khamenei, that means that you don't understand the complexity and the reality of the Iranian Islamic Republic, and therefore you're not going to eliminate it. You're doing all the wrong things, and I think this is the case here. This attack is actually strengthening the republic. As we speak, there are demonstrations in various cities throughout Iran, pro-government demonstrations with hundreds of thousands of people coming to the streets and the squares, rallying in support. The opposite of what the regime change operation is hoping to trigger. They're trying to trigger hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, cheering the death of Khamenei and encouraging the overthrow of the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so we have people cheering things they don't understand. It's like, again, a horrible analogy because it's late and I'm tired, but it's like, going to a football game and thinking you're watching baseball. And whatever you cheer, it isn't what you think you're cheering. People are cheering a regime change operation that simply is not only dysfunctional, but non-functional. There is no regime change operation taking place today because the regime remains intact.
What would a regime change look like? In other words, if they succeeded, if the United States and Israel succeeded, uh, who would they try to put in charge? How would it work? Could it work?
Well, they don't seem to have an answer to that. I would imagine the CIA has, again, back in the day, whether you agreed with the CIA or not, when you met with them, they were at least prepared. I mean, they at least pretended to be professionals. You'd sit down around the table and there'd be somebody there who, has done their job and has, been out there doing, Lawrence of Arabia stuff in Iran, meeting with various tribal leaders and, maybe wearing woven bracelets and, having obscure tattoos because he's been amongst the indigenous, somebody credible. He may be insane, he may not be rational, but at least he's out there doing stuff. The people that are around the tables today are people who are academics who cut their teeth in the halls of academia or in the halls of power in Washington D.C. who are extraordinarily politicized, but they're not experts on anything. They haven't been to Iran. They haven't worked amongst the Iranians. And so we know that Jared Kushner met with the diaspora, business leaders and such, to create sort of an advisory board on what the next government of Iran would be. And so we have people at that level, the political level, because Jared Kushner is not an expert on anything, let alone regime change, let alone forming a alternative government. But it seems that the trust and confidence of the president has been placed into him. So we don't know who they pick. There's talk about Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah, but he has no credibility. Even Trump is like, I don't think he's much loved inside Iran because he isn't. And the others, you think the Mujahideen al-Khalq will be embraced? It won't be. It's just an obscure terrorist organization. The Kurds are Kurds. They're not going to lead Iran. PJAK is not a national unity entity. The Baluch Liberation, the same thing. There is no Iranian opposition leader that has credibility amongst the people of Iran. And this is what would be required. Because let's say, hypothetically speaking, there's enough animosity inside Iran to trigger, um, because regime change will happen when the people of Iran stop viewing the government of Iran as the legitimate expression of their will. And so when the people abandon the Islamic um, republic and say we're done with that, that's regime change. But then what replaces it? It's not there. So you know, not only don't they not have a government in exile waiting to take over, there is never going to be this loss of faith amongst the Iranian people, at least not now. The more we bomb, the stronger the Islamic Republic becomes. The people are rallying behind Iran. Even people who might have said, "I don't like the theocracy. I would like to see it replaced." They're not. They're Iranian patriots, and they're not going to sit there and say, uh, "Bomb my country, hit a school, kill 108 schoolgirls." Slaughter other innocents, destroy the infrastructure, starve my fellow Iranians. These aren't Iranian patriots, people who buy into that. And the patriots of Iran are people who are saying, we stand with Iran. And Iran today is defined by the Islamic Republic and the constitution that currently exists. So there is no regime change plan. And this is one of the reasons why this entire endeavor will fail, because if your goal is regime change and you don't have a plan on how to achieve that and accomplish it, you've lost from the start. Just right out the gate, it's over.
Now, you said last week that there could be somebody in the Revolutionary Guard Corps who's greedy, who you might be able to pay off, or you may be able to maneuver into a position on the civilian side of this. But you have to also replace the head of state, the Ayatollah. It has to be a new religious leader, and that may not be so easy for the United States to get to corrupt someone there. I mean, we're talking about two leaders you need, wouldn't you?
If you want to, it depends. If you want an Islamic Republic, I mean,
Ah,
I think the United States would like something other than an Islamic
yes.
Republic, a secular Iran, which now you've run into problems because the reality of Iran is, there is not a very large secular community inside Iran. You can go to Tehran and you can get, and I apologize to all of the Iranian people out there because when I say things like Tehran, you're probably cringing because I know I'm mispronouncing it, but forgive me, I'm just an American and I mispronounce everything, including my own name. So, but when you go to northern Tehran, um, there is a, a accumulation of westernized elites who are secular and don't support the regime. And so you can be confused if you go there and hang out there to say, well, wait a minute, there is an option. But if you leave Tehran and you go out into, Iran proper, it is a deeply religious nation where the Shia faith is part and parcel of who the people are. And so the idea that you're going to come in and eliminate Islam from the lives of the Iranian people is absurd in the extreme. Um, you know, when we spoke about last, we were just going over a range of possibilities because,
Right.
my I have this maybe naive attachment to competence, meaning that as much as I've opposed the policies of the U.S. government in the past, I've always believed that there's a core of competence, that there are people there who know what they're doing, et cetera. And I believe I told you and I told others that I can't imagine the military and the intelligence community allowing a president to go forward with an operation of this nature unless there was a viable plan in place, a plan based on reality. And so, if that's my foundational, point of departure, then as you speculate, you say, well, then that must mean that they must have a source inside Iran. They must have somebody inside ready to do this. There must be some reason to give them hope that they can initiate an operation like this and achieve a positive outcome. And so I manufactured the possibility of a corrupt Revolutionary Guard. I talked about Rafsanjani's expansion of the Revolutionary Guard into the economic affairs of Iran post Iran-Iraq war, and how that could have created a window of vulnerability to be exploited by a competent CIA. But it was pure speculation. I didn't sit here and say I have the case files that say this, that, and the other thing.
Right.
Um, it doesn't appear to be the case. I mean, maybe tomorrow we'll wake up and find out it was the case. Maybe we'll see a coup d'etat, we'll see something. But right now, what we're seeing is an immediate, competent retaliation by Iran that implies that the military command is 100% on the side of the Iranian government, and they are implementing a retaliation plan of extreme complexity, and they're implementing it with great efficiency. This is the last thing you'd be expecting to see if we had penetrated the Revolutionary Guard, because not only is the retaliation undermining confidence in the American Israeli operation abroad, but again, if you're trying to get people to rise up in the streets, and you create this notion of regime change, but the regime is beating the crap out of everybody, it's hard to see how people are going to rise up in the streets to go up against a regime that's showing extreme competence in the defense of Iran. So a competent CIA would have sought to undermine the Iranian response. The fact that the Iranian military and the Revolutionary Guard is responding as competently as they are implies that this penetration that had been hypothesized by me when we last spoke
Right.
hasn't happened.
Right. Well, what you're discussing, if they were to change the system from an Islamic republic to a secular republic and have a secular president instead of a Ayatollah, that's a revolution when you change the system. That's not just a coup anymore. And it's very hard to, I think, to engineer a revolution without popular support and
Right.
uprising. So I don't see how they could pull that off. But let's say that I saw you this morning when you were full of more energy when you started today with Mario Nafel, who was getting very nervous sitting in Dubai as he heard that they were going to start hitting the countries in the region. You said then you brought up Putin. Why hasn't Vladimir Putin killed Zelensky? There are many opportunities. And then you were saying, so killing Khamenei, what kind of impact would that have amongst Shia Islam across the region, whether that be southern Lebanon, Bahrain, which is 90% like Shia, right? And the rulers
Mhm.
are Sunni. What would happen if his death is confirmed?
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, we have to understand that Khamenei is not a political figure; he is a religious figure. Um, there's there again the ignorance of the American people and the people who are supporting this effort. Their ignorance of Iran is manifest. Their ignorance of the Shia faith. You know, the Shia faith is, I'm not the greatest theologian in the world, but it's predicated or built upon the concept, I guess, of Ali and his resistance against the false Mahdis or imams in the Battle of Karbala, and the martyrdom of Ali in the Battle of Karbala, and Hussein, and my point is, you know, it's a religion that is predicated on the notion of resistance, resistance against oppression and such. And so the last thing you should want to try to do is create martyrs for a religion that reveres martyrs and rallies around the concept of martyrdom. So the stupidity of this, if you want to get rid of Ali Khamenei, you keep him alive, and you use AI to manufacture pornography videos. You do something that dismantles his credibility as a human leader or a religious leader. You leave this flawed human standing there to be mocked by people, but you don't martyr him in a resistance, because right off the bat you've just elevated him now to heroic status, if in fact he is dead. But you've also killed the second most revered man in the Shia faith. The first, and I know
Ali
many Iranians,
Sistani.
is
It says
Sistani out of
Sistani.
Najaf. Yeah. Um, Many Iranians might take umbrage at that, and I apologize, but my understanding is that within the Shia, the global Shia community, Sistani is deemed to be the leader of the greatest influence. But Khamenei is right there. He is a very senior religious figure, and they just killed him. It's like killing the Archbishop of Canterbury, like killing the Pope, like killing the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. These are steps once taken. You've entered into an existential phase of conflict, meaning you can't reason with somebody who is killing your religious leadership, because now that means they have targeted the totality of your faith. And if you want to solidify resistance, if you want to put steel in the spine of people, kill their leader like this, especially a Shia, where it just becomes an act of martyrdom, and they become even more determined to rally around their cause. So it shows absolute ignorance. The other thing it does is it's open season on leaders now. I mean, because remember, they didn't just go after Khamenei, they went after Pezeshkian, the president. We don't know his status either. The Iranians claim he's alive, but we know they blew up his palace. They went after him. Um, this means there's nothing to hold the Iranians back now. There's no constraints on the Iranian response. In the past, whereas they may have been restrained, they may have had an escalation ladder approach to the conflict. Here, all the barriers have been removed, and the Iranians get to do anything they want to in retaliation, because there is no tomorrow. There literally is no tomorrow for them. If they do not resist fully and effectively, there is no tomorrow. People are trying to eliminate them. They are killing their senior most religious leaders. They are killing their political leaders. They are marking everybody associated with this regime to death. Donald Trump has said that. We have amnesty. Take the amnesty or die. And so the Shia who believe in martyrdom are going to say, okay, I choose death. And they move forward. This makes Iran a much more difficult nut to crack, because these are people now that aren't inclined to look for a compromise solution, because compromise is death. So they become uncompromisable. And you see this in their response. The immediacy of the escalation into attacking not just U.S. bases on the soil of Gulf Arab states, but the Gulf Arab states themselves, shows that the Iranians understand what's at play here, and they're holding to account everybody who has facilitated the ability of the United States and Israel to carry out this attack.
If you go to the South Beirut, you see pictures everywhere of the Ayatollah, the Iranian leader in Beirut, in Lebanon. I was in Bahrain, and the cab driver I had, he had a picture of Sistani in his window, who of course lives in Iraq, not in Bahrain. So I've been to Saudi Arabia, but never to the eastern region where the oil is and where the Shia live. And I suspect they
Yeah.
also are revering Sistani and Khamenei. Now that Saudi Arabia has basically declared war against Iran, they're really ticked off, and they feel violated. That what is the impact in Saudi Arabia on the Shia community if they find out there that they killed Khamenei, or their ally, the United States, killed Khamenei?
The thing about the regime change sword is it's a double-edged weapon. Um, you know, we've unsheathed the regime change sword, and we're trying to, use it to hack away at the Iranian government. But what we've done is unsheathe the weapon that can slay the person who unsheathed it. In Bahrain, as we speak, the majority of Shia population is cheering as Iranian missiles rain down on Muharraq, home of the Fifth Fleet, but also on the Bahraini government targets itself, Bahrain International Airport, etc., because the Khalifa family, a Sunni family, is reviled, not revered, reviled. I was in Bahrain a lot as a weapons inspector, and the depravity of the Khalifa family, it was manifest. You didn't want to go to the Sheikh's beach if you were a woman, because you could be taken and it these aren't good people. These are, if you want to think of the worst behaviors of the richest Saudi prince, then magnify it by 10, and you have the Khalifa family. Despicable human beings, all. And they, in the past, they had to have the Saudi military come in and save them. Remember that when the
Yes, they went
demonstration
over
took
the
place?
causeway. That's right.
They went over the causeway to save them.
Mhm.
Uh, and so, again, we're talking about existential realities. When the Shia faithful wake up and understand that their supreme leader, the man who is the head of this, is the personifies the supreme jurisprudence of their faith, has been marked for death. Um, it could lead to regime change in Bahrain. The Saudis have always feared the the Shia population of the eastern provinces, because that's where their oil is, and if they decide to rise up, there could be a problem. Um, if this continues and the Iranian government marks the Saudi government for regime change, to encourage the Shia to rise up, that is literally the death of the Al Saud family. Um, and so regime change is a double-edged sword. Donald Trump is now susceptible to regime change. To be honest, the Iranian regime has a greater likelihood of outlasting Donald Trump, because he going to war the way he's done in Iran, unless he gets a miraculous victory, he pulls a rabbit out of the hat. Um, he's just committed political suicide. And I mean, J.D. Vance, his vice president, appears to understand this. There was a very interesting post that J.D. Vance put out there, talking about what happened, as you mentioned, 3 years ago, when we illegally invaded and occupied Iraq. He said, we did this. It was bad. Thousands of Americans died. Many people died. Hopefully we have learned our lesson. But the answer, the purpose of that tweet is we apparently haven't learned our lesson. And Donald Trump will be swamped in this midterm election. I don't think he survives. So regime change, we're looking at a change of the American regime. Benjamin Netanyahu is in a very fragile state. He is the thing that keeps him alive is his status as security leader. And, the final obstacle was the elimination of the Iranian regime. If he does this, he can claim that everything else, his failures on October 7th, his violations of Israeli law, etc., that was all a price worthy to be paid for the outcome of eliminating the Iranian regime once and for all. But if the Iranians stand tall, and instead, what you get is sustained retaliation that results in destruction and death in Tel Aviv, Haifa, the castration of the United States as Israel's security guarantor. When the United States runs out of ammunition in the near future, and we will run out of ammunition in the near future, this war is over. There's nothing we can do. And if Iran continues to fire missiles, we will have to sue for peace. And at that point in time, Benjamin Netanyahu becomes a failed leader who could see the collapse of his government and then see himself hauled before the courts of Israel and held to account for viable charges of corruption. That's regime change. And so, the sword has been unsheathed, and yet I have a funny feeling when this is all said and done, the last man standing will be the Islamic Republic, and you're going to see a whole bunch of regime change around them from the people who were trying to overthrow the Iranian regime.
You compare a man like Donald Trump to the Ayatollah, and I'm not, it doesn't matter what you think about religion. This is a serious culture, and they're serious about behaving a certain way. And he was called by Trump, who looked like he came off the golf course, to make this announcement, and was very laconic and not into it at all. In a
Yeah.
dark area somewhere in Mar-a-Lago, it was just, he calls, now he's calling Ayatollah one of the most evil men in history. Forgetting Stalin, Hitler, etc., Attila the Hun. I mean, this guy is just out of control. He should be looking in the mirror. He's such a disaster. But let me ask you about this. Trump, in that ridiculous speech that I just mentioned, he threw the glove down to the Iranian people. He said, it's up to you now. You've been waiting for a president to do this. I'm doing it now. So let's see how you respond. It sounded like to me, Scott, that maybe he's setting them up. If it fails, then he's going to blame them. They didn't do it. I did everything I could.
This is one of the lowest energy speeches I've seen Donald Trump give. Maybe it's a result of exhaustion, et cetera. But on the campaign trail, when he was going through very long days, he still was energized. He was motivated. He gave, you know, whether you like him or dislike him, you had to respect the fact that this man was a machine. Um, the guy who gave this speech is a guy who didn't want to be there and doesn't believe in the cause that he's doing, which backs my assessment that this war was inevitable. It couldn't be stopped, and that Donald Trump doesn't necessarily believe in this conflict. He believed in it at one time, but you know he fired the director of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for having the temerity of telling the truth that, Mr. President, we can't accomplish what you want us to accomplish. We lack the resources to do this. We can't sustain the campaign with the available resources. And even if we could, we will run out of ammunition before we run out of targets. And we will lose this conflict. He fired him because this is a political war. People need to understand that this is not a war of necessity. There is not a viable threat out there. The lies that have been told about Iran's nuclear program. Iran was actively negotiating with the United States through Omani cutouts, where they were putting forward proposals that would have resolved all of the concerns of nuclear proliferation, all of the concerns about the potential to convert a peaceful enrichment program for military purposes. They were beginning to outreach with the International Atomic Energy Agency on the return of inspectors to verify this deal. No sunset clauses, no anything. This would have been the better deal Donald Trump claimed to always have been seeking since he tore up the JCPOA. But it turns out this was never about that. This was always an Israeli-driven regime change operation. And that once we began flowing military forces, just had been the case with Desert Storm and Operation Iraqi Freedom, the flow of logistics brings on its own momentum. And at some point in time, the momentum is such that you cannot reverse. For this president, this war, the timing of this war, which was decided with Benjamin Netanyahu a while ago, it has nothing to do with these negotiations. These negotiations were set up from day one. This was an operation that was timed because you had to achieve a specific result in a specific window so that it could be politicized to have an impact on the American voter in the summer of 2026, leading, to create pro-Trump momentum into the polls. For Trump to have listened to his generals, he would have had to not only hit pause, but actually hit reverse on a lot of this military buildup. And when you hit reverse, you've now altered the window of strike opportunity. It closes here. And by the time you can get everything set back up and moving again, it doesn't open until the summer of 2026. And at that point in time, if you go to war when you're the candidate of peace and have told the American people you will not get involved in a military entanglement and that you are America first and you aren't going to fight for Israel, too many questions appear with that fighting without the ability to get the results you want, and the election is thrown away. So he had no choice but to pull the trigger now. And he, I think, understands that he has committed political suicide because this war will not be won decisively. And
he also committed homicide, Scott. Reuters is reporting 6 minutes ago, Iran state media confirmed Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has been killed. So it's confirmed by Iran. Yeah.
Well, it's homicide. But Ali Khamenei at least is the leadership target. All right, we may not support this and all that stuff, but you can make the case. For instance, during the Gulf War, we tried to kill Saddam Hussein. He's a leadership target. The homicide is the 108 children that were killed. and bombing a
Yes.
school. The homicide is the 200 civilians that were killed. Um, so that's the murder. But now that Khamenei is, first of all, the fact that the Iranians have confirmed this, I think one of the reasons why they've held off confirming is that they, are dotting their I's and crossing their T's, making sure that when this information is released, they are ready for any potential outcome. So the fact that they've come out and confirmed this means that they're not afraid of the consequences of this revelation, that they're ready to continue and sustain and move forward. So for all the cheerleaders out there, all the Iranian women in diaspora who are doing their little boogie dance on the internet of glee, dance away. It's not going to change the result. Missiles are still landing on Israel. Missiles are still landing on Abu Dhabi, Dubai, on Kuwait City, on Manama, on Riyadh, etc. And this will continue to happen. And the streets of Iran will not be filled. My bet is tomorrow, when the sun rises, the streets of Iran are going to be filled with people mourning the loss of Khamenei, not people
Yes.
celebrating his demise.
And you might see the streets of southern Beirut and Manama in Bahrain, the same thing. There was a huge revolt there in Bahrain that they had to crush with the help of the Saudis. I was there the day that the military law was lifted. And even then, I was in a cafe and two Mahabharat guys came in and beat the crap out of this young man right in front of me. I'm eating a sandwich, having a coffee, and they just left him bloodied on the floor and walked out. This was right after this rebellion. So you keep your eye on what happens now that he's dead in that region. But my question to you before was, do you think Trump is setting up the people if they don't achieve regime change? Is he saying, well, I did everything I can? It's your fault?
Trump is looking for Trump is starting to create explanations for failure.
Already in the speech
Yes.
announcing the war.
In the speech that he is using to announce this conflict, he is creating a face-saving mechanism right off the bat to say, "Look, I gave you this opportunity, and it's up to you. It's not up to me. It's up to
Yep.
you to do this." So, that's my interpretation. This was the lowest energy speech that he's given at the highest energy moment. I mean, this is the moment when if you're a Trump supporter and all, you need a high energy president up there saying the dumbest things in the world, but saying it with the Trump energy, something, that motivates the masses and, makes educated people roll their eyes. But at least there's energy there. What this was an extraordinary, this was a defeated man, a man who was defeated as he announced this military attack, because he understands what happened. We're not going to win this war. He's going to go down as a loser, not a winner. And he's staring political disaster in the face come the midterms.
Um, One last question about regime change. Some people are saying that you cannot do a regime change with just airstrikes, that you got to put ground troops on into the war. What do you think of that?
No, I disagree, and especially in a
Yeah.
case like Iran. Well, I mean, I'll just answer it this way. How many American troops were on the ground when we overthrew Mossadegh in 53? The answer was none.
Yeah.
And American troops would actually be counterproductive because now it's a foreign invader. This regime change model that they have is exactly what Donald Trump said. It's up to the people to rise up and take control. That's how you achieve regime change, is get the people to demand a new regime. Or you get enough power elites to manifest a regime change so that the people awaken in the morning with a fait accompli. For instance, Mossadegh is no longer in, and Reza Shah Pahlavi is empowered. And so, but to do that, we'd have to actually have a game plan and have somebody ready to replace in case
Right.
this happened. None of that exists. But no, first of all, we don't have enough. We don't have enough boots to put boots on the ground. This would be hundreds of thousands of American soldiers. We've been deploying squadrons. We haven't been deploying divisions.
Yep.
And so we're not geared there. There may be some special operations forces operating on the ground. There may be some CIA paramilitaries out there working with the various militant opposition groups. But we would be talking about hundreds of people, not hundreds of thousands of people, and it's not an occupation. They're there just to provide advice, etc.
Right. As you pointed out, Iran was absolutely no threat to the United States, to any of its neighbors. Um, and yet, this is a classic case where the aggressor tries to portray the victim as being the aggressor, as having the threat. This is over and over again what we heard. And now we've seen, for example, when the bombings first began, I saw that Keir Starmer, who may be ripe for regime change as well, he just lost a key by-election. He's really in trouble. But he said, Britain's not involved in this. Don't look at me, we're not involved. And then I saw Ursula von der Leyen, our friend, she said, this is Iran. Iran is hitting its neighbors. They have to stop. So, of course, Starmer, Macron, they're all piling in. That's the European position. That this is Iran being the aggressor now because they're hitting their neighbors, removing what is plain to everyone to see. And apparently at the Security Council this afternoon in the UN, this was the theme. They were blaming the territorial integrity of Bahrain had been violated, the Bahraini representative said, for example. So this thing of taking out who the real aggressor is here, how could anybody fall for this, Scott? Really, I don't get it.
But again, Joe, it's because you're educated, you're smart, you have
How smart you have to
a
be.
foundation of. Well, you have to be a little smart, just a little smart. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to have 20 PhDs, but you have to have a functioning brain that is fact-based. What we've seen is, again, it comes back to what I've talked about with Russia and everything. The entire system that is supposed to educate people so that they are grounded in fact-based truth, so that when we make policies, even if you disagree with the policies are founded on reality, not fiction. That doesn't happen anymore. If you want to deal with Russia, having a degree in Russian area studies where you are an expert in Russian culture, an expert in Russian history, speak the language fluently, and can travel to Russia and interface with the Russian people effectively, that's not what they want. They want somebody who says, I have written a PhD that Vladimir Putin is the most evil dictator on the planet. They go, yes, you are qualified now to make Russian policy. It's the same thing with Iran. We don't want people who have been to Iran, people who have traveled the region, who understand the difference between Sunni and Shia, who maybe speak Farsi, maybe have are familiar with the cultural heritage of the Persian people. We don't want them. We want people who say Ayatollahs are bad, Ayatollahs are evil, and the Shah is good. And these are the people that we embrace. And so these are people who are shaping narratives that are premised on. Joe, how did we get people to believe that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction in 2003? Because even Colin Powell didn't believe what he was saying to the Security Council, and anybody who had a brain cell knew that he was lying. But everybody they were preconditioned to cheer when Colin Powell held up the vial of white power.
That was
Yes, that's
his
what we
vile
want to
display.
see.
His vile display.
Yeah,
His
a
vile
vile
display.
display. And so we're programmed to cheer ignorance, and this is what's happening here. We've been told that Iran has a nuclear weapons program. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, has said they don't. But Donald Trump says she's wrong. That's, he believes somebody else. Well, he believes Israel, who has lied about this issue from day one. I remember when I was a weapons inspector in Iraq, the way that the Israelis, once they realized that the game of supporting legitimate disarmament was no longer acceptable in Washington, D.C., the Israelis stopped providing support to the weapons inspectors and started to undermine the weapons inspectors. And one of the things that they did is produce this thick paper that talked about how Iraq was reconstituting its nuclear enrichment infrastructure to create a brain trust of people and a accumulation of technological nodes of expertise that would allow them to rapidly transition into a nuclear weapons program. And I looked at that paper and I said, you guys know, all of this is a lie, that this is manufactured. You've made this up, but it doesn't matter. The decision was that's the direction they're going. So the Israelis have been lying about, you know, they lied about Iraqi nuclear program. We all know that that was a lie now. The same people are constructing the same lies against Iran today. It's all lies. But when you're feeding lies to people who are programmed to accept the lies without question and cheer them, then you get what you saw today in the Security Council and in Europe. When you try to feed lies to a discerning audience that says, well, wait a minute, I have a question, a follow-on question, and won't accept BS as an answer, then the lies tend to fall apart. But that's not what exists today when we're dealing with Iran. We have people in place who are who have been programmed for years to accept the lies, and even if they know they're lies.
But before the Iraq invasion, 2003, and the 1991 first Gulf War, and we discussed this in detail last week, there was a huge buildup. There were speeches made. There was the Security Council resolution and the congressional authorization for the first Gulf War. Bush couldn't get the Security Council, but he got an authorization. They had a coalition, only four with the second Bush, but 35. Trump hasn't even tried at all to go to the Security. Of course, it would have been vetoed, so he didn't go to the Security Council. Didn't go to Congress. Why didn't he go to? He said that Iran is a constitutional republic. Is the United States a constitutional republic anymore? Why didn't he go to the Congress where he would get the votes? I don't understand that. I have an idea, but I really don't understand. He would have gotten the votes because the Democrats are all for Israel, and of course the Republicans, which he has the majority. Why didn't he go to the Congress?
Well, this administration is the most unconstitutional administration possible. They're geared towards a result chain that is outside of the Constitution. It's premised not on the checks and balances of the Constitution, but rather the dominance of the cult of personality. We don't function as a constitutional republic. We function as a cult of personality built around Donald Trump. And this is why, because to go to Congress means that you are saying this is a process that has legitimacy. What the president's saying is, I don't need to go to Congress. I have the power myself. So even though he would have gotten the votes, he's not going to embrace a process that he says is not required for the cult of personality that is Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, he barely mentioned Iran in the State of the Union on Tuesday. It was only at the last minute that Witkoff came up with this idea that they were a week away. They didn't even bother making it. Like you said, he didn't care about Congress. He doesn't care about the public supporting this thing. He cared about Netanyahu and what Netanyahu wanted him to do. And who knows what information about Trump Netanyahu has that he may have reminded the president that he has. But I still think that this bad job of trying to sell the war, it's still people believe the lies that Iran was a threat. They can't see who the aggressor is in this war. It is so bloody obvious. Even the Secretary General of the UN has condemned it because it's illegal. There's no Security Council resolution. It's clear the U.S. is the aggressor. Let me ask you about this school.
But what we're seeing here, Joe,
yeah,
is
go ahead.
I had a fascinating conversation when I was in Russia with a former lieutenant general who was an advisor to the Minister of Defense Shoigu when he was the Minister of Defense, Andrei Ilnitsky. And he is a man who has brought forward a concept called mental warfare. And mental warfare is the kind of war where you seek to destroy societies from within by corrupting the imagination, corrupting the value systems, et cetera, through internet videos, through movies, through conditioning, through echo chambers, et cetera. And what we've seen is that the MAGA movement is literally a vector of mental warfare. That this whole process of creating the Trump cult of personality is a process of corrupting the minds of Americans from within. So they stop functioning as citizens. They stop functioning as people who believe in constitutional due process. And they create this echo chamber, and you see it on the social media where a lie can be put out there and then immediately gets echoed. And thanks to Elon Musk's algorithms, they get put forward and dominate that which people see. And so this is how you can get a president who says, I don't need to go to Congress, because all he needs to do is have his bot army manage the flow of information and how information is presented to the minds of Americans who get their information here, by clicking, and have stopped being discerning consumers of information, meaning that trust but verify, read but doubt, check, look for sources, etc. Instead, these people are followers of people now who control the narrative. And so I'm a follower of X internet influencer. All I do is I read this person and like and repost and hit this guy's right. And then you get the echo chamber moving forward. This is how the MAGA movement is energized, and it's 100% process driven, ignorance driven, and it's succeeding. As long as Trump can keep them on target in terms of the narrative. This is why he doesn't need to go to Congress. This is why he doesn't need to do the traditional route of at least trying to explain to the American people in a press conference, because he has basically subordinated, delegated this responsibility to the practitioners of mental warfare, his ideological army that is rotting the American mind from within.
Is there any military purpose whatsoever, even from a psychological warfare point of view, to hit a girls' primary school and kill maybe over 100 girls this morning, or was that really an accident, like Israel says?
Well, first of all, there's no military purpose to it, and no, it achieves the opposite result. It doesn't demoralize the people; it rallies the people. It steals their heart. What this does, though, is tells me that the Israelis are, again, when we went to war against Iraq in Operation Desert Storm, the target deck that we had was a very mature target deck, meaning that when I opened up a targeting folder, I had a supporting folder this thick full of all the intelligence information that led us to say, this is the target. This is why we want to bomb this target. As the war went on and we started blowing up these targets and the Iraqis continued to resist, we started building new targets, but we didn't have the same level of confidence in them. And so by the end of the war, we're literally blowing up school buses going across the deserts of Western Iraq because they are of a size that could theoretically carry a Scud missile. Stupidity extreme. We never would have bombed that target up front, but the standards slip. If the Israelis are striking a school on day one, it means that their targeting standards are very poor, that they are literally building a target deck that is based upon inaccurate information and ignorance. And so when you have a military campaign where the Israelis brag about, we're going to have 200 airplanes flow in and strike 500 targets, you have to say, well, wait a minute, what targets are you hitting? Why are you hitting these targets? And by bombing a school on day one, it's clear that the Israelis don't have the insight into Iran that one would expect when you're building a target deck.
Interesting, because this was in the town of Minab, which is on the coast right at the Strait of Hormuz. I would suspect that maybe they were trying to take out some military installations there, but the Strait of Hormuz, Scott, is closed because voluntarily ships are not going in and out. And Iran also apparently has told ships that are in the Gulf, don't leave because we won't necessarily get out alive.
Yeah, I always love when the U.S. military says stupid things such as, if Iran tries to shut the Strait of Hormuz, we will open it instantaneously. I mean, that was the mantra of the Fifth Fleet. Well, the Fifth Fleet today is getting blown to hell in Mohark, and Iran has shut the Strait of Hormuz, and there's not a damn thing the United States can do about it right now because we're knee deep in a campaign that we lack the resources to sustain and finish. Um, let's see what this does to the global economy. Let's see what impact that has on Trump's cheerleaders when they wake up in the morning and MAGA finds out that the price of gas is up, interest rates are up, the economy is collapsing, the AI bubble is burst, and on and on and on. All the bad things that can happen when you have a collapse in global economic performance that can be triggered by an energy security crisis when you shut off the choke point through which 22% of the world's energy flows.
So let me ask you about just the short term and then a larger picture. This seems like what this phase that we're in now might continue for a week or 2 weeks, where the U.S. and Israel continuously, 24 hours a day, send in sorties, shoot missiles from ships, um, and continue to take out what? The offensive ballistic missiles, the air defenses. And what can Iran do? They've already sent, apparently, one, they're now reporting in Israel that one got through in Tel Aviv and has killed someone, one bomb. But they're not, that information is not coming out very easily as it didn't back in June last year. So, what is the short term, then, 1 week, 2 weeks from now? How do you see it playing out?
Well, the U.S. military has hinted that the initial phase of this conflict is a 4 day, 96-hour, nonstop bombing campaign, day and night, just surging sorties out there to suppress all this capability. And that, the people who are, for instance, against what I'm saying are saying it's just the first day, you know, come and talk to us on day 4 and let's see how it works. Okay, on day 4, we will see. Did this campaign achieve the results that they want? Will sustained pressure over the course of 96 hours result in the collapse of Iran's ability to launch ballistic missiles? But I think what we're going to find is at the end of day 4, um, we haven't solved that problem. If after the end of 96 hours, Iran is still targeting, U.S. bases, Gulf Arab countries, and Israel, and they're able to sustain the rate of fire that they have today. According to the Iranians, this is what they're going to be able to do. They're going to start, unveiling even newer weapons, more devastating weapons. So we'll see. I mean, is this air campaign capable of retarding Iran's retaliatory capability? Is it capable of suppressing the regime's ability to defend itself from domestic unrest? Is it capable of motivating the Iranian people to come into the streets? That's the claim that they seek to achieve after 96 hours, 4 days. Um, so I guess we have to come back and take a look at this at the 96-hour point when the first phase of the campaign stops. There will be a pause, and I would imagine at that pause, Trump and company are going to be begging the Iranians to end this. It's over. You've lost. We've won. And I think the Iranian response will be to send another 500 missiles off to various targets and say it'll end when we tell you it ends. Because the Iranians are prepared to fight a much longer fight than 4 days. The Iranians are in it for the long term. This is an existential war of survival for the Iranians. And they have been preparing for this. The notion that they're not prepared for this is absurd in the extreme. They're ready to sustain this. They're not going to run out of ammunition. And I don't have confidence in a 96-hour bombing campaign to achieve the results they want. I say this as a veteran of a strategic air campaign waged against Iraq, where, especially when it came to missile interdiction, et cetera, we failed across the board. I don't know if we understand the Iranian target sufficiently enough to prepare strike options that could successfully suppress Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. But we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sitting in on Central Command. I don't know what their strategic vision is. I don't know what targets they want to hit. I don't know how they've sequenced this campaign.
And Iran still has in its quiver the hypersonic missiles, which they reserving. So what they're using now, you're saying they have a really large supply. That's what I keep hearing. Can they do real damage to the U.S. bases from which the attacks are coming? Because some stupid reporter at NBC asked the foreign minister of Iran, is it justified to hit American bases? And he tried to explain to her that they attacked us first. So, I mean, it's the duty of a nation to defend its people by hitting the areas, the bases from which the attacks are coming. But can Iran really damage the U.S. military, or is it mostly a cosmetic?
I think we're going to see when this 96 hours is up that Iran will have ended up doing tens of billions of dollars of damage to the American infrastructure. We already know, for instance, a $1.1 billion early warning radar system that was installed in Qatar has been destroyed. Another $300 million system in Muharraq has been destroyed. The Iranians are destroying high value targets throughout the region. The other thing that's happening is, again, there was a video clip of an Iranian missile attack against Al Udeid, where we saw 3 Patriot interceptors launched, and um, the Iranian missile penetrated and hit the base. You know, uh, our missiles cost more than the Iranian missiles, and we fired 3 to stop them. We didn't stop them. We saw other instances, again, Al Udeid, where they're just cycling. We emptied almost every Patriot in the launchers that were there. Um, we're running out of missiles. We
Yeah.
I mean, and that's going to be very, very expensive as well. So even right now, if the missile defense architecture is preventing the penetration of the core area of operations of the U.S., say in Jordan, and forcing the Iranians to have success on the periphery. Eventually, we're going to run out of these missile interceptors, and then it doesn't matter. They'll just come in and they'll hit everything and suppress everything. And this is why the director of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was fired, because he raised this in a briefing. He said, we're going to run out of interceptors. We're going to run out of bombs. We're going to run out of cruise missiles. We're going to run out of everything. Um, and the other thing in too is, okay, they killed Ali Khamenei, but now there's a new supreme leader. Um, what does the game plan say there? Was the game plan predicated, on regime change? Because that is the goal. That your regime change target deck is solved when you kill the president and Khamenei. Yay, we won. Now shift resources over to suppression. But what happens if, after you killed these 2 people, if indeed they killed the president, we don't know yet, and they go, well, constitutionally, the vice president's now in charge, and the Assembly of Experts has elected a new supreme leader, and we're back together with a intact regime. Now you got to go back to targeting that, which is an unplanned factor, which now means that not only the resources that you expended up front have been wasted, you now have to divert resources back to the regime change target deck. And those are resources that aren't doing the regime suppression and missile defense. And, during Desert Storm, we had to do this with the Scuds. We had to divert thousands of sorties to Western Iraq and expend munitions, et cetera. But we had sufficient resources that we could do this. It complicated our planning. It extended the air war, but we never ran out of bombs, and we were never in danger of running out of bombs. Here, you have an operation that started with the understanding we don't have enough bombs, which means that everything has to work perfectly to get the sequencing that you want to achieve the outcome you want. And we know from the start that it's not working perfectly. And therefore, we're going to have to put more resources on doing foundational things to get the sequencing in effect. And we're never going to achieve the outcome, because even if we're having success sequencing, we run out of ammunition. So I just think that we've set ourselves up for failure in this.
Why is the U.S. running out of ammunition? Give too much to Ukraine, for example?
We have given not just Ukraine, Israel. I mean, our 2,000-pound bomb.
Oh, for Gaza. Yeah. Right.
It takes a lot of takes a lot of bombs to flatten Gaza, and we
They
have
had to
we
do a
just
genocide.
opened
Yeah.
up the stores and gave them to Israel. Um, we on the missile interceptors, yes, we've given them to Ukraine, but also remember that 12-day war sucked up 20% of our arsenal, just gone. And what's happened in the last 24 hours is we have a depletion rate and we've never mobilized our defense industry. I mean, one of the things that Russia has done that we haven't is when they went into the 300,000 partial mobilization back in 2022, the fall of 2022, they also began the process of mobilizing their defense industry. And today, the Russian defense industry is just chugging out full steam ahead. They are producing missiles, bombs, everything. Not just enough to sustain the war in Ukraine, but also to build an expanding military capability. We haven't done that. We haven't expanded our production capacity. We haven't tripled our production lines. We aren't building the reserves because that's too expensive. It requires an investment of money that we're not going to make because then you have to admit that we're at war in Ukraine. No politician wanted to admit that. We're trying to win on the cheap. On Israel, we didn't want to admit that Israel's actually draining the lifeblood out of our military. So we lie about it because the second you ask Congress for money, there has to be congressional hearings and you have to explain, what happened to the money that was previously allocated. And so what we've done is we've deluded ourselves into believing that we're in this position of strength. We're in an absolute position of weakness, and people need to ask the following question. I don't think it's going to happen, but let's say, 96 hours from now, we come to the realization that we haven't achieved what we want to achieve, and we have to continue this conflict. We're going to have to fire more cruise missiles. We're going to have to drop more bombs. We're going to have to use more interceptors. And what if China made a move on Taiwan? We will have zero capacity to resist the Chinese. That's just the statement of fact. This ridiculous, regime change operation in Iran is going to fail. It's going to humiliate the United States, but it's also going to fundamentally weaken us across the board.
I think it would be kind of poetic justice if, because the U.S. participated in the genocide in Gaza, that they've used so many of their weapons, then that uh, supreme crime, that they could lose in Iran because of that. They would run out of weapons. That's the comeuppance, maybe.
The supreme irony would be that the people of Gaza who were pummeled and had this genocide foisted on them, in the end rose up and were part of the accumulation of resistance that led to the collapse of the Netanyahu regime. So I don't know how this is
Yep.
going to end, but I would love nothing more than to see the flag of a free Palestine waving over Gaza as people exploited the fact that the United States ran out of bombs because the heroes of Gaza absorbed those bombs.
Wow. Yes, sir. The interceptors, running out of the interceptors last June was the reason why Israel came running to say we got to stop this, and the Iranians agreed. Will they agree this time if Israel runs out of interceptors? What do you think? We don't know, but what's your guess?
Well, I'm not. I can't speak on behalf of the Iranian government, but I will say this: that this is an existential conflict. This isn't a conflict where the Iranians are saying, "Well, if we stop it, maybe they'll change."
Yeah.
The we have gone in heavy and we've put them on notice that we're going to kill you. So therefore, what motivation is there for the Iranians to accept a ceasefire until which time the behavior of the United States and Israel and the policy objectives are ended? And you only can achieve that by defeating them. So as if if one of the paths to victory is to deplete missile interceptors, why would you even take that phone call? Well,
Yeah.
the response is, "No, we're going to keep coming at you. You go ahead and keep bombing us. That's okay. Oh, you're out of bombs. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You want to borrow some of ours? And we're going to keep firing at you. And you can shoot. Oh, you can't shoot them down anymore because you don't have any missile interceptors. Hey, I'm really sorry, but you started this, not us. And no, we're going to continue until the deed is finished. You wanted regime change. You're get regime change. but it's not going to be us.
Yeah,
And I think that's the attitude that the Iranians have right now.
I think they realized they were twice deceived during negotiations.
Yeah.
The war began, and they've just killed their supreme leader. I don't know if they're in a mood to shut it off this time, are they? But I don't. What I don't get
I,
is you saying that they could lie about this too, because they don't want to explain to Congress why they need them. How can otherwise intelligent, rational men running the Pentagon realize we don't have enough weapons to go into this? This is the reason why Israel didn't want to go last month. We don't have enough interceptors, and yet they've done it anyway. They know what they're facing. I don't understand. You will know that better than I do, obviously. I don't try to explain
well, again,
why they do that.
this this is a failure of leadership. We have allowed the military to be politicized for so long. Um, we saw this during the Gulf War, when we had 8 years of Reagan and 4 years of George Herbert Walker Bush. 12 years. The average military career is 20 years, and you have these cold warriors that are in the military who have been serving, the United States, and they come out of the Gulf War, and suddenly they have a government come in, Bill Clinton, who doesn't look to the military as an apolitical force. He sees them instead, especially the senior leadership, as representative of the Reagan Bush political machine. And so he starts denigrating these officers, replacing them, and starting to pick officers that are more ideologically aligned with them. This is how he got Shalikashvili and others. The denigration of Barry McCaffrey and things of that nature. So the politicization, and then we had 8 years of Clinton where he went out of his way to build the military leadership that he wanted politically, and then we yaw over to George W. Bush, who now looks at the senior leadership as overly politicized in terms of pro-democracy, and so he starts to flush that system. And so what's happened is we've created a military culture that no longer, rewards military professionalism. And now what happens is, you go up at the lieutenant colonel level, you go up before a board to see if you're qualified for battalion command, which is essential for, for continuing your career. And this board isn't evaluating you on, your leadership, your tactical proficiency. This board is evaluating on your political acumen. Can you function politically in the environment? And if you're asking that question, then you're asking the wrong question. But we have a military now that is overly politicized. We have people who've put far too much emphasis on getting that star and getting that second star and that third star and that fourth star, and all the compromises they made along the way to get to the position to get that star. They're not going to throw it all away by suddenly growing a pair of balls and telling the president no. These are people who have sold out from day one. Our military is corrupted from within, and that's one of the fundamental problems that we have. We have a military not of professionals, but of yes men, and they've now said yes one too many times.
It sounds like a feature of a declining empire to me when you describe the military in that situation. I want to close, Scott, and I thank you for your time in this long, long day by looking at the big picture. If Iran is now part of BRICS, if Iran achieves a victory in this war, would it be bigger than just stopping Greater Israel in its tracks? Would it also weaken, would slow down Greater America? Is this the battle of our time? Is the unipolar world against the multipolar world? Is Iran the forefront of that battle right now? Is this part of the historic conflict we're seeing?
I believe it is. I mean, I've raised eyebrows, and I respect that, but I've said that, first of all, understand that Iran is a full-fledged member of BRICS. They are at the table, the big table. And what Donald Trump is trying to do is remove Iran as a member of BRICS. And if he's allowed to get away with this, if he's allowed to, target a member of BRICS, he's not going to target Russia. He's not going to target China. He is trying to target India. And India is susceptible to political pressures, economic pressures, geopolitical pressures, etc. But India follows the perceptions of strength. Where does India need to go to best position itself? And right now, India is looking at the United States saying, wait a minute, the United States is flexing its muscles. So, the India is destabilized. But if Iran goes, I will guarantee you the following two things will happen. The United States will then target Brazil because it's in the Western Hemisphere. And we will get Brazil to drop out of BRICS. And then we will target South Africa. And we will compel South Africa. We will collapse their economy, seek regime change, and we will get them. And so instead of BRICS, you'll have RIC. And then we'll remove India, and you've got RC and remote control, and we're going to crash it. This is the vision of Donald Trump. Now, from the Russian and Chinese perspective, this is an existential fight for BRICS. They need to keep Iran in place, intact, and the rule of law well defended. Russia has a vested interest in the north-south economic corridor linking St. Petersburg with Chabahar, in the warm water ports that can then allow goods to transit into India. China has built the new Silk Road connecting Western China with Tehran. This is all part of their exploitation of a Eurasian economic union and this vision. They need Iran to be alive and well and living and a part of BRICS in order for this vision to succeed. So we are seeing a fundamental existential clash between two systems, and Iran is the battlefield.
Okay, Scott, thank you so much for being with us. I just want to end by saying the New York Times is promoting this video of Iranians in the street celebrating the death of Ali Khamenei. So there's some of them, but we don't know how many.
Yep, we'll see. Like I said, 96 hours, we'll find out whether or not the United States actually had a game plan.
That's good. So that means you and I have to get some sleep because we got 96 hours to cover.
We got
Thanks
96
so much,
hours
Scott.
to rest before we have to talk about this again.
And thank you to your wife for making sure you showed up tonight. I really appreciate it. Okay.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
All the best, Scott. So for Kathy Vogel, our producer in Sydney, and I thank the audience for joining us, and of course Scott Ritter for being an excellent guest once tonight to help us make some sense of what's been going on in Iran and across the Middle East. 8 countries have been involved. If you could believe, Syria was hit as well. And the U.S. even bombed Baghdad today, a neighborhood where a Shia militia was based. And they promptly said they would, after losing 3 members, they would go and attack U.S. bases in Iraq. So this is just beginning, and we will certainly be staying on top of this as well. Check back to Consortium News for updates, and we'll see you next week on This Week, The World This Week. Goodbye.
Get out your notebook. There's more.
If you are a consumer of independent news, then the first place you should be going to is Consortium News, and please do try to support them when you can. It doesn't have its articles behind a paywall. It's free for everyone. It's one of the best news sites out there, and it's been in the business of independent journalism and adversarial independent journalism for over 2 decades. I hope that with the public's continuing support of Consortium News, it will continue for a very long time to come. Thank you so much.